Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Season 2 of Diversability Amplified, the podcast where we elevate disabled pride together by sharing the voices and stories of our community. I'm your host, Marie Dagenais-Lewis, a pale-skinned woman with long dark hair wearing black glasses and a black lace top, and I'm the operations manager at Diversability. I have the pleasure of being joined today by Catarina Rivera, one of our members from the Diversability Leadership Collective, for a chronically candid conversation surrounding their disabled experiences. Hi, Catarina. Do you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself before we dive in?
Sure. I'm so excited to be here today. So I'm a light-skinned Latina woman with dark brown wavy hair that's long. Today I'm wearing a black sleeveless top with ruffles and brown glasses and a little bit of lipstick. And behind me is the Blindish Latina logo in a virtual background. It's a bold black eye with the words at Blindish Latina written in all caps in black. And the logo is just repeated multiple times in columns and rows. So visual description out of the way. A little bit about me is that I am a public speaker, DEI consultant, and content creator. I am the founder of Blindish Latina, which you can find on Instagram, and it's also my business. I work with clients to help them with disability awareness, inclusion, and accessibility. A lot of my clients are corporate, and I also have worked with nonprofits and educational institutions as well. So I love entrepreneurship, but I also have a long career where I was a teacher and I worked in a nonprofit setting for a long time as well. And as far as my disability goes, I have Usher syndrome, and I was diagnosed when I was 17, but I was hard of hearing from a very young age, and I've worn hearing aids from 3 or 4 years old. I use a white cane for blindness and mobility.
Awesome. Thank you so much just for sharing. And I want to dive right in because you were saying about how you do a lot of work with disability and DEI. It always seems like disability is the afterthought when it comes to a lot of mainstream DEI work. Can you please share the importance on ensuring that disability is included in DEI and why we need to make sure that we are consistently being inclusive of the disabled?
Of course, this is a message that I share often, time and time again in my work, because it is still very much needed. A lot of people who are doing diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI work, do not prioritize disability within that work. We have seen other labels come about, like IDEA, IDEA, that has accessibility, or just DEIA. And I think no matter what the term that you use is, we have to understand that disability is a huge group of people, that it can impact anyone, and it's really necessary to include disability in any type of equity work, especially because when you think about who is struggling in the workplace, who is not getting the support that they need, is often disabled employees that have really horrible stories of struggle and just discrimination. The amount of covering that they are doing if their disability is not apparent to others is a lot of energy and work on top of their workload. So the first thing that I always talk about with people that don't understand the importance of disability is just that 1 in 4 adults in the US is disabled. And I believe that's an undercount. I'm sure there's more. Globally, we see that it's over 1 billion people worldwide that are disabled. And you cannot know if someone's disabled just by looking at them. So in the workplace, we have a lot of employees that have not disclosed to their employer. They have not told HR about their disability. And it's only 21% that have disclosed to HR. So when you're not including disability in DEI work and you're trying to make a more equitable workplace, you are perhaps not seeing who you're missing. You're not understanding. what you're leaving out, but you're sending a message that you're not inclusive for everybody when you don't consider disability, when you don't have accessible events. And their stigma is great in our society. So it's very hard for people to advocate, to be public. It's not something that we should expect of every disabled person, especially because the disability journey is very personal and it takes a lot of time. You know, I have been on my journey with blindness for almost half my life now, more than half my life. And I only started using a white cane like 5 or 6 years ago. I, in my 20s, wanted to hide my disability. I didn't want people to know that I was blind. And it's been such a shift for me and so powerful now to be in disability pride. But I think that the most important thing is to understand that if you don't include disability, you're leaving people out. You're not going to be as innovative, or you're just not going to make the impact that you want as a company or as a leadership if you're not including disability. And then even if you're focusing and doing great work on race and gender, you're missing people who are disabled women or who are Black and disabled, Latina and disabled, and you're not going to make that same impact on everyone.
Mm-hmm. You have such a great point that disability is so intersectional that you could be a great ally for one part or like one community, but by overlooking the intersectionality of disability, you're still overlooking part of that community. You're not actually being as inclusive as you can. And it's like one statistic that really made me made me feel something was that 60% of disabled employees expend their energy masking their disability. And I believe that was the Center for Talent Innovation from that statistic. And it's like so many of us are hiding our disability because we don't want to be seen as that burden. We don't even acknowledge it to ourselves sometimes. I totally believe and feel the same as you, that number 1 in 4 is actually probably larger, but because of the stigmas surrounding disability, we won't self-identify. We won't even acknowledge to ourselves our struggles because we don't want to be, we don't want to be perceived as whatever the ableist society has made us feel that disability is. And because of that, I would love to go a little bit deeper because people often assume that accessibility is special treatment for the disabled, that it's just something for disabled people. But I'm really starting to think, especially with our conversation, that accessibility actually helps everyone, no matter how they identify. Do you mind going a little deeper on that?
Well, there's so much I could say about accessibility, but I want to start with the classic example that I think still makes it super clear. Like, I'm going to keep using this example, the curb cut example. When we think about who curb cuts were designed for, they were designed for wheelchair users. But I know that everyone listening has used a curb cut, whether you were pulling a suitcase, pushing a stroller, pulling a package, you just wanted to be safe. It's easier to walk and safer to walk when you use the curb cut. That is what happens with every single piece of accessibility. Anytime you implement greater accessibility, you might be designing for one group, but other disabled people benefit. And then beyond that, the greater public, the greater group benefits. Because there are so many times when people, like, for example, let's take captions. We're using captions right now so that this conversation will be accessible to me. Someone else who has ADHD will benefit from captions. It helps them to understand information. Someone else might be tired. They might not be disabled at all, but that day they might be like, oh, I'm just going to turn on the caption because I'm too tired to do as much work with my hearing. And so having that option when you create accessibility, especially when it's integrated and available for everyone, like you don't have to make a special request, then every person has that ability to choose that accessible option when it works for them. We think about other technologies that everyone uses. A great example of this are emails, text messaging. Both of these were invented for the deaf and hard of hearing, but have become common and just so widespread. Everyone's using email, everyone's texting. So that's the level that any accessibility change can go, where, especially when you make it universal. And when I think about the workplace, one of the things that happens often when people talk about disability, they talk about accommodations and they're really focused on that. But if you focus on accessibility and inclusion and what you can do to build into your culture, then you are just going to have a better impact on your employees and your workforce, because anyone who's temporarily disabled, having a hard time with something, has a learning disability that you don't know about, whatever it is, they can benefit from that accessibility. And you're just really not going to know who needs something. And accessibility is beautiful when it's designed with in the beginning of everything that you're doing, or you're including accessibility, you make a space more welcoming and safer for everyone. And that's just something that I like to talk about a lot. In my TEDx talk, I gave examples of easy and simple ways to make the workplace more accessible and inclusive. Because I think a lot of people think it's really high tech and expensive. And there are so many best practices that are completely not expensive. So I talked about meeting notes, meeting agendas, and captions.
Mm-hmm.
And these can help everyone.
Mm-hmm. Really, it like blows my mind to think about accessibility and how some of the most used objects of this day, like text messaging, audiobooks, electric toothbrushes, how they were created to make life more accessible for the disabled. And then at some point, it's like that accessibility need, that disability connotation just got taken away from these inventions. And so we don't like know, like someone who's not in the disability community, they won't know that these were created for disabled people. They won't know that the typewriter was created by someone with a disability. It's like the ableist society just takes away all of the mass improvements disability has done on our society. So then you'll have the ignorance of, well, disability is a burden on our society. No one, the disabled doesn't do anything for society. Like I get this stuff in my YouTube comment section so much of like people trying to justify ableism because the disabled just don't do anything for society. And it's like the thing you're typing on, that was not, that wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the innovation that disability brings and the accessibility that it just inherently exudes because of that innovation. I had no idea when I was growing up that I had a learning disability. I had a physical disability. I knew that, but they don't really tell you what autism looks like if you are a girl. And if you are quote unquote high functioning, they just will overlook you. And so for 26 years, I had no idea. I was just really hard on myself. I was really socially awkward and I just didn't know. And so I always felt guilty for using closed captioning because it wasn't meant for me. I didn't have that same type of accessing to where I couldn't hear. I just couldn't process it for some reason. I just could not, like I had to constantly make people repeat. And so then when I was 26 and I started to actually learn about autism beyond what the ableist society like tells you, it was like the light bulb, it just went off. It was finally understanding. And I let myself use captioning now all the time because I was constantly trying to force myself to exist in that ableist society to where I surrounded myself in audio that would constantly trigger me. I didn't know I had an audio processing disorder. I didn't know that I had sensory triggers where I would feel a certain way because the sound was too much. And it's like having that universal accessible design just inherently created into the fabric of our society would make it so much easier and so much, it's just a more gentle experience for people who don't know these parts of themselves because of the stigma still in society. Like, I remember the Victoria's Secret store was my most hated store to go into. Bright, loud noises all the time. And I had panic attacks just thinking about it. And I always forced myself to go in though, because I had to, like, what's wrong with me? And so just knowing that the accessible design and just knowing that accessibility is for everyone, I really think that's so life-changing.
Thank you, Marie, for sharing those powerful stories from your own life. I think that your vulnerability is definitely making a difference in everything that you're sharing.
Oh, and right back to you, because like you said, it's so hard sometimes to open up these most vulnerable parts of our lives and have to constantly advocate, to educate, and constantly fight back the devaluing systems and like validate why accessibility is so needed. And like, it's so tiring. So really, I would love to know, how can we support all of the work that you do? How can someone reach out to you? What kind of services? Because you mentioned a little bit your services, but I want to go a little deeper on that so people can really support you and also book you as well.
Of course. Thank you. I love that as an entrepreneur. So I've been in business for a little over a year now. The offerings that I have are keynotes, workshops, presentations, fireside chats, and consulting. A lot of times, the clients that I'm working with have not had an event about disability. I'm really coming in to start the conversation. And that is such an honor. It's a great place to be in. And I love that they're reaching out to me because I am not just disabled, I'm a woman, I'm Latine, I'm Cuban and Puerto Rican. So I don't represent what we often see disability represented as. There's a lot of white representation. So I appreciate being able to come in as with all of my identities and talk about my story while also making sure that the foundation is being started for people to learn about ableism, intersectionality, the importance of focusing on disability inclusion. So a lot of times we do that with a fireside chat because that's an organic conversation. It's nice to have people just in a safe space hearing that kind of dialogue, because I also dialogue with someone internal to the company. In terms of my longer term clients, I do have some clients who are ready to create change and they want to work with me on a consulting basis. They want to have more of a series of workshops or get some advice on their strategy. So that's work that I'm also very excited about doing, because then we can create more of a lasting impact, especially on company culture. And anything that we can do to policies will create that structure so that it's more inclusive for everyone moving forward. It's not a one-time event. And that's really important to me to keep building as my business grows. As far as my other stuff, I'm a content creator. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn. So if you're just a person and you're not someone with a DEI budget, you're not going to hire a speaker, you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Instagram at Blindish Latina and just share my content, see what I'm talking about. You can share my TEDx talk with other people and help generate that conversation. I'm really excited about the work that I'm doing online to talk about accessible travel and make more awareness within brands. So that's something that my lifestyle is centered around. I travel the full time and I work remotely. So I love being able to show my life as someone who is disabled and maybe living life in a way that non-disabled people wouldn't expect. So that's something that I'm really excited about doing as well, to do more accessible travel content and partnerships.
I love it. Like, you didn't brag on yourself, so I have to brag for you too. You just won one of the LinkedIn top 10 creator voices in disability. That is so amazing.
Top 12,
top
yes,
12.
so amazing. Yes, that was incredible. Out of the whole platform. And I have only been posting on LinkedIn seriously about disability since February 2021. So I was just like really proud of myself for becoming a voice that people would recognize in that way.
You really should be, because you are slaying it. Like, I know all of the work that you're doing is changing lives, and it's going to be one of the reasons that the future is going to be what we want it to be, because you're showing people this is the way you do it. Here's how you can do it. And you make it accessible through so many different platforms, because yes, you have that paid option, but like you said, even for people, if they don't have a DEI budget, if you're not looking for paid speakers, if you're just a human who wants to be a better human, you can follow Catarina on social media and just learn by surrounding yourself with different creators who have different lived perspective and experiences. We are, I lost track of time. We are close to the end. And so I just want to thank you so much, Catarina, for taking the time today to help us kick off season 2 of Diversability Amplified and really just share your story and your work. It's been such an honor, and I am so excited just to have you in the community and to be able to call you a friend and to keep up with your work. So thank you so much, Catarina.
Thank you, Marie, for having me. It was so much fun to talk to you. I knew this was going to happen. We could talk for hours about this. So it was great to be a part of season 2.
Oh, thank you so much. And we will talk for hours one day. I hope everyone has such a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for listening to Diversability Amplified, and we will catch you on the next one.